Welcome to the Hit It to Hoover podcast, episode 3, hosted by Jake Nichols and Mitch Davis. On today's podcast, we're joined by Tennessee head baseball coach Tony Vitello. Coach, welcome to the podcast. Jake Nichols and I are excited to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excited to be included as well. Appreciate it.
Coach, let's just jump into this. The questions here. How's the offseason going for the Tennessee Volunteers?
It's going well. It's kind of going about the norm. You've got weather changing every day. You've got a mad scramble, in part due to NCAA rules to get arms ready. Unfortunately, we got a few nicks and knacks with guys. No, crazy injuries that have popped up, but some guys that have to rehab, or one of our better arms that won't be with us the first few weeks of the season. So just kind of managing the typical things that come around this year, and also trying to temper the boys' excitement for wanting to play on opening day. We still need these last couple weeks to prepare before at least the coaches can feel confident on opening day.
Coach, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Jake Nichols, who covers you on the regular. He's got some pretty big roster questions for you.
Sure, bring it on.
So, Tony, first of all, I just wanted to reiterate, man, it was a blast being able to cover you guys in Omaha, and seeing, I guess, the revitalization of what you guys have done for this fan base has been really cool to watch.
Well, thank you. It's been pretty dang good to be right in the thick of it, and of course now it creates expectations and other things. But I think that's what everybody wants. You want to have high standards, and then you want to be challenged to uphold them, and that'll be a part of this season, and hopefully for many seasons to come.
So, just getting right into it. Like Mitch said, going off a couple roster spots, Jordan Beck listed as a preseason All-American. You talked about his athleticism last year a lot. How have you seen him grow this offseason? And given that athleticism, what kind of expectations do you guys have for him?
He just seems much more stable is not the right word. Obviously, consistency is a big word in baseball, but he's just really kind of matured on how he shows up every day. Now, there hasn't been a day the kid's been here where he hasn't had a smile on his face, and a great work ethic, and open to learning things. But everything just seems to be more calm and a little more stoic and a little more balanced for him on how he approaches at bats, defense, base running, just being in the locker room, clubhouse. And it's been a pleasure to see. And he's kind of turned himself into a well-rounded baseball player the first couple of years here. And now this third year, I'd say he's truly a leader on this team in several different capacities. So regardless of what kind of numbers he can put up this year, he's going to be a force for us in many different ways. And it's exciting to be around. And I'm also excited to get some free MLB tickets from him, because I feel confident he's a big leaguer, sometime in the relatively near future.
Awesome. So touching on that leadership aspect, you mentioned Jordan, but with having so many, I guess, guys in the locker room that were so pivotal to that leadership last year leaving, how have you seen other guys fill that role, whether it's, Evan stepping up a little more, or other guys kind of filling in?
Yeah, I think guys have a better feel being the fifth year we've been around. Each year we gain ground on what are the coaches like? What are they looking for?
Right.
What are our routines? And so I think you hit the nail on the head. There's guys that have now seen what success looks like and how things are supposed to be done according to kind of our program, and they can run with it. But also, again, that added experience of just having a better grasp on things even makes sophomores or other guys more confident to run with an idea or have conviction to something they have to say to the rest of the team or something they want to do.
Do you feel like Kyle Booker is one of those guys? And can you mention any others that you've seen step up that are maybe a bit younger that have kind of, become more outspoken, like you said?
Yeah, I think Kyle's just become much more mature, and a lot of that is understanding those things we said. So it's a good name to bring up, and just the vibe you get from him every day is again kind of like Jordan. It's more consistent, and it's more in line with what it takes to kind of be a pro, because he's another guy that hopefully will play this game for a long time. It's been great to see that development, and that's the fun part about coaching. That freshman to sophomore year might be the highlight. At least for this coaching staff, it's when you see the biggest jump physically, but also mentally, or in the maturity category for guys. And Booker kind of epitomizes that.
Perfect. going over a little bit of a newcomer side, I guess. You talked about how, Seth is obviously out probably until the start of SEC play, a big blow, and then dealing with everything with Blade. So with Ethan coming in from Vandy, you said the other day that you guys haven't heard anything yet from the NCAA. Do you have any other update on that before I guess we go any further into him?
Yeah, no, I wish I did, but the NCAA gets swamped with these types of cases nonstop, and they are obviously in charge, so they've got to use their best judgment. I feel like Ethan has a strong case or a strong set of circumstances that maybe make him a unique deal. So hopefully it all works out, in the best. But the kid has a great attitude. He's obviously anxious to hear. He's dying to compete this particular year. But overall, I think he's happy to be in an environment where he feels comfortable. And the guys have gotten to know him, and he's obviously got SEC stuff. So it would benefit us just as well if he could pitch. But it's kind of like the weather. It's out of our hands. And we'll let the people that are smarter than me get all the paperwork figured out, and then we'll go with whatever the verdict is.
Perfect. Going a little deeper into him, what do you feel like his transfer from an in-state rival says about your program, and that you're still, attracting so many guys from other spots, even around the conference?
I think it kind of has something similar to do with the transfer portal conversation as well. We didn't really seek out the two guys we ended up getting out of the portal, or Ethan. It's just now that we have a little bit of a brand name going, people see that and they look at it, and either they don't like it or they do. And if it's for them, that magnet is now kind of out there for what our brand name is to attract certain individuals. And the three guys that transferred in here, or just quite frankly, the guys that we signed last year and including this fall, are guys that watched last year and said, I want to be a part of that. And then for every other team, there's not one team in our league that doesn't have something similar going on. And I think you and I know the league well enough. We don't know every program in and out like I know this one, but we could point to some stereotypes each program has. And there's enough good players to go around for all these programs as we see on the field. And it's just kind of a matter of what is attractive to the kids and what they're looking for. And Ethan obviously saw something over here that appealed to him.
Whether it's, I guess, Drew being as, confident as he is, or overall, guys taking leadership roles, how would you define that brand name that you talked about, kind of what this program has been built into?
Well, I think part of it is it's got to be organic. You can't force it. There's some things you really want to hit on and you'll repeat every day. So they are your cliches or your phrase in the locker room, but part of that's got to become organic. And that part, last year was the fans were rowdy. They took to these kids and the kids kind of fed off of them. In addition, we're never going to have the fanciest stadium in the country. We were behind in that category. We were behind in recruiting. We're not in Florida, SoCal, or Texas or Arizona, where kids play year round since they grow. So there's a lot of things I could point to where I don't want to use the word underdog, but we've got to kind of overachieve in some categories in order to compete with programs like University of Florida that have maybe a richer tradition, warmer weather, a little bit better facilities, or at least that are more up to date than ours. Our time is coming in that category. I could list a few other things. I think you get what I'm getting at. Their coach certainly has more experience and a better resume than I. So we got to make this ground up somehow. And I think it's by maybe working a little harder, maybe trying to play a little harder and do some little things that can make up that gap, because I think it's more fact than opinion that there's a gap in some categories. And so regardless of how much success we had last year, we're fortunate to have some. We got to keep some of that as our brand, as you kind of pointed out, and make it as good as we can.
Perfect. So going off that, that's actually kind of a perfect segue to my next point. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask about the updates to Lindsey Nelson. And I know you talked about it with Tim a little bit with kind of the bleacher additions, but can you go into that anymore? And obviously not, a permanent solution, but, just being able to get more bodies in there and pack it in like you guys did last year during regionals and super regionals.
Yeah, no, I'm staring at it right now. It's pretty cool to see the second layer of the porches, and right now it kind of looks like it looks like nice scaffolding, but just kind of
Right.
scaffolding. But it's pretty cool to see and then envision the body sitting up there. And of course, the school will dress that up a little bit, so aesthetically it'll look better. But also, you're hoping to double in size the crowd you have in that very popular left field kind of bleacher bum area. And then along the left field line, we stripped away some kind of I don't know, areas that probably needed to go, and now we can just dump seats and bleachers over there that'll have chair backs. It'll look clean, but as you alluded to, these are all temporary solutions. One that I really like is we moved a playground area and opened up an entire deck. It's down the right field line just for students,
Oh
and that
wow.
way they can roam around a little more. There'll be room for more of them, and I think it'll be a similar scene to what you see at Mississippi and some other the hog pen out in left field in Arkansas, where they have a strong student base. So all around the park, there's been adjustments. We're hoping for bigger and better and fancier, but for now, I think it's very very functional, and it'll make sure we don't have StubHub tickets for $300 that our fans have to buy. I mean, that was pretty cool last year, but it also shouldn't be like that if there's fans that want to come to the games. And then for our kids, they love the environment last year. And I hate to say this out loud, but you'd like to think with what we're talking about, it could be even better this year.
Right. And, when you think about those moments, like, Drew's walk off against Wright State, Evans, I guess, 3-homer day against Vandy, like all those moments that get people excited. I feel like it has to really, create kind of what you talked about last year, that fire for wanting to reestablish that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think now as we go back to what we were talking about with expectations and things like that, I think our guys need to realize, which they did last year, it's tit for tat. The fans aren't going to come out to see obviously a losing product, but more importantly, they want to see the same passion and kind of grind that kids like Max Ferguson and Liam Spence played with
Mhm.
last year. Of course, Drew did too, but there's got to be something that's entertaining to come see. And man, SEC ball is entertaining no matter what programs are out there. But the Vol fans, they'd like to see a championship, but more than anything, they just want a team that they're proud of. And so that's our job as coaches to make sure our kids are kind of in line with what, those folks are looking for.
Now, before we move on from the stadium bit, I know, like I said, I apologize. I know everybody's asked you about it, but you mentioned maybe the extension of that right field line and kind of maybe closing that in. Have you heard any more about what that could look like?
Yeah, it kind of stinks because it is a popular question and there's no definitive answer. That's a good and a bad thing. It'd be nice to say this is what we're doing. The shovel's going in the ground as soon as the season's over. Unfortunately, there's red tape, and then fortunately, we have a new administration that's very creative with their ideas. They're pretty ambitious about doing this thing in a big, big way. And then they've hired a really strong engineering company that has met with us several times on campus, has been very hands-on, and we're expecting drawings sometime soon of what it could look like. But the odds are we're going to go back to the drawing board, and those drawings will look different the next go around. And then probably somewhere down the road, we'll have a final plan and a timeline where we can get those things done.
Nice. Well, I kind of want to go back to the roster for a second. I kind of got a little off base there. Obviously with everything you guys have done, there's kind of a lot of stuff to cram in. So I apologize for kind of going off the rails there a little bit.
All good.
But back to the roster a little bit. So with Evan, obviously transitioning to catcher, how have you seen him grow in that, and what's the competition looking like between him and Charlie Taylor right now?
Well, it's very competitive if you just break it down on how the guys are playing and how they're working. Charlie, they're both in different categories. Charlie is a redshirt freshman, so he's been around the block, but he hasn't been in the heat of the battle, so to speak. So, he'll gain some experience, and it'll be fun to see how he does as each weekend gets more and more competitive. With Evan, he's in a different spot. As you mentioned, he's a team leader. He's earned the right to be in the lineup, even if he's in left field or DHing, but he will spend most of his time catching this year. And where he's grown is he's kind of got a renewed sense of humility. He almost kind of has the I don't know the right way to say this, but kind of still the senior swagger, but the
Mhm.
freshman work ethic, or again, humility, I think is a good word. He understands he doesn't know everything there is to know about the position, and it's going to be an ongoing learning experience throughout the year. And like you have with a talented freshman, like an Andrew Benintendi, who at times wasn't in the starting lineup as a freshman at Arkansas, but by the end of the year was the three-hole hitter. There's many other examples as a freshman. Those guys that are talented enough to play at the beginning, they almost look like different guys at the end of the year. And I think Evan Russell is one of those guys who at the catching position will look like a different guy each week. And I think with his work ethic, he'll improve each week. And we've got another guy like that, Ben Joyce, who's a pitcher with stuff that a lot of people are talking about because he throws hard. Physically and stuff wise, he's like a 24-year-old. Pitching experience wise, he's like an 18-year-old. So I think it's going to be fun to watch his progress as well. And I think we're going to have a different pitcher in May than we do in February.
Nice, definitely shaking things up, I guess, as opposed to kind of the three-pronged unit that you had going into each weekend last year then.
For certain.
So going off that, Evan and Drew and Blade both have, or actually all three, I believe, have NIL deals going right now. So I wanted to touch on that too before I hand it back over to Mitch. What's it like to see those guys getting recognized, and I guess to watch the college athletics world change so much, and to have some of your guys be at the forefront of that?
Yeah, I think big picture, it's a little scary what can happen and is already happening in football and basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I think for baseball, it's obviously right now on a downscaled version. And I think it's nothing but a positive for these kids to get what they deserve. And to me, it's get back to neutral. I mean, how many kids have spent money, or their families have spent money to universities in order to fill that gap between, hey, you're on 50%, which is a great scholarship, and maybe even a 25% academic scholarship. Well, how expensive schools are these days. That's still a good chunk of thousands of dollars each year. So, let's just say player John Smith is getting an NIL deal for $10,000. That's incredible for a baseball player in 1 year. That 10 grand might just be making up gas money, travel money for parents, and what's left over to pay for school. So I'm looking forward to these guys at our program and others just get back to neutral, and hopefully it doesn't turn something into something scary for our sport. But the bottom line is it's here to stay. I know coaches are not supposed to be involved, but you still hear rumblings and you see people at the park and you see things on social media. I really like to credit those three guys you mentioned. They deserve anything they get. And I applaud them for handling it the right way. It hasn't been a distraction. It's not like it's a full-time job where they're running around Knoxville trying to find, an extra $100 to put in their pocket. So it's gone very well. And I don't know how you measure which fan base is going to do the best, because each sport is different within the athletic department. But I'd like to think our athletic department as a whole will be as competitive in that category as any athletic department in the country because of our fan base.
Awesome. Well, going off that, I kind of thought of one, as you mentioned, filling that gap, so to speak. But do you feel like with all the changes in NIL and, even like coaches' salaries and stuff like that, do you feel like give you any more leverage or any more argument for, I guess, eliminating that volunteer coach aspect and trying to bring in more assistants like what people can have in other sports?
Yeah, you think so. And I'm just going to be honest. I just thought of this off the cuff. I don't even know what the deal is for NIL. What if a donor wants to, pay a volunteer coach to do something, and now you're getting into a deal instead of the guy having benefits and being taken care of the right way, you have all this, either backdoor stuff or things that are taking away the volunteer coach's time from what he should be doing. And that's coaching and developing the guys on the team. So you'd like to think that'd be the case, but I don't know. Before we got on the phone, I just reviewed an NCAA waiver or ruling on our sport for next year, and I had to calm myself down. Sometimes common sense just doesn't seem to come into play. And I know there's Title IX, and I think our softball program is more important than the baseball program, especially if you look at what they've done the last decade. So I'm all for everyone getting their just due, but it's kind of time for the NCAA to maybe spend a little extra money or spend a little extra time and separate all these sports. Track and field is a huge deal in the SEC. You got Olympians competing, but track and field is not women's soccer, and women's soccer is not baseball. And even softball, as close as it is to our sport, is not baseball. They use 2 pitchers. We use 16 or maybe more, or 12. And
Right.
so it's time to separate these sports and come up with a set of rules that make sense. And for how many players we have on each roster, it does not make sense to only have 2 full-time assistants that are working with these guys and supposed to be preparing these guys for either life or pro ball.
Perfect. Well, Tony, I appreciate the honesty and, speaking out on that. I know it's kind of been a hot topic for you guys, especially because, I know considering the impact that Ross had last year before he left for Houston, that it was monumental. So,
yeah. And it's great for Ross that he got that, but there's a great example of a guy who, he wouldn't have left.
Right.
He would still be here, and, good for him that he got the job, and now it opens the door for another volunteer to be able to do what he can do. But there's not a lot of SEC type programs out there that can find a way to make it a great paying job for these guys that are working the same amount of hours that we are.
Right. Well, I guess my last question, like I said before, I'll hand it back over. Getting back a little more into the baseball aspect. You guys started off against a good Georgia Southern team last year. Obviously a very gritty, I think, kind of chippy series down there in Statesboro. Have you touched on them at all yet, or has the prep all been kind of internal right now?
Yeah, it's kind of been internal. I know our video coordinator initiates some of the scouting report stuff, and then our assistants run with it. So I don't know where they're at with that, but we haven't talked about them or looked at them as a staff. We do have Chase Dolander, who was on their team last year, but I haven't even brought it up to Chase. I mean, for right now, it's, Chase is trying to improve each time on the mound. I don't even know what his role will be, even though he has great stuff. So there'll be some familiarity there. But you talk about the first weekend of the year. What you're hoping to have is just not a bunch of dummy mistakes. You knock the rust off when they come back from Christmas. But I think for both programs, what we would like is what last year was. It was competitive. The road team, which was us, had to deal with I really like their fan base. They had some comedians above our dugout. And then, they had a great crowd considering it was so early in the year. There was some, drama to the whole thing and situations that are important to prepare you for conference play. So, call that getting our money's worth or whatever it might be. I think both programs and coaching staffs just really want that out of the first weekend. And then it goes without saying you'd rather win 2 than lose 2. So winning the series will be paramount, but even more so be just kind of the learning and preparation experience.
Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Mitch. But, before I go, I guess wanted to reiterate, like I said before, how cool it is to see how much everything's changed in such a short amount of time. And, like you alluded to, that passion, from the tunnel greeting you guys in the elevator in Omaha to everything that people have been kind of hyping up over the off season. It's been really, really fun to watch from a journalistic perspective, and I'm sure from you guys. So excited for this season, and can't wait to see what you guys do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and look forward to seeing things grow or pick up where we left off.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jake. Coach, a couple questions for you from me. I want to ask you about the importance of recruiting the state of Tennessee. You guys have 15 guys from the state of Tennessee, 1 from DeSoto County, which is South Haven, which is about 5 minutes from the state line of Tennessee. Coach, how important is it to lock down the state of Tennessee in recruiting, and how are you seeing those guys wanting to come play for the state school at the University of Tennessee?
Well, I think the NIL thing will address that a little bit because, in my experience since I've been here, and it's to no one's fault or not a negative thing, but there are a lot of families and kids that love the state of Tennessee and love the idea of playing here. But when it comes time to pulling the trigger, there's a lot of other things that come into play, and finances is a big one. Our school is more expensive than others. We've got to recruit to win the SEC. Some other schools do not. And then each school is different in the type of aid that they can combine for guys. And then to further complicate things, I need to look this up. I think our state borders more states than any other in the entire country. So having said that, a good example is Memphis. There's a lot of Vol fans down there, but Mississippi State, Arkansas are all closer to that place. And then University of Memphis is sitting right there too, able to scoop up some of the better players because they're in their backyards. So it's a unique shape to the state, and it's a unique deal where a lot of states have a tuition waiver where even though you're not from Tennessee, you could go to school here for an in-state tuition. So finances, sales pitch, or recruiting styles really come into play, and we learned that in early on. So for me, I think we would love to have more and more guys from the state. The state is incredibly talented in baseball. Again, I don't know that it's at Arizona or Florida level, but it's right beneath that. So we need to continue to do a good job. But I think that means know who all the best players are in state, in particular the ones that fit what we're looking for, and be aggressive about getting to know them and finding out if there's a match. But unfortunately, I don't think that lockdown word is ever going to really make complete sense in our equation.
Coach, what is that recruiting pitch like to those kids, and what do you tell them to get them to come to the University of Tennessee?
Well, I think part of it is they got to want to be here. Now we got to do our job and meet them in the middle and let them know, what we think they can do or why we think they'd be a great addition to the program. But I'll fall back on my earlier answer about our program has got to find a way to compete in certain areas where we're in the best league in the country. And maybe we don't have as many advantages in certain categories as this program. And then it could be a different category, and I could pick out a new program or two that we don't have as many advantages as they do. So the way to make that up, in my opinion, is through people. I was throwing out some cliches like work ethic or play grittier and things like that. That's easy to say. But the bottom line is I think we got to have as many good people surrounding our kids as possible. We got to bring the right families in here, and we got to find some inches. If you could rewind the VCR and watch the Al Pacino movie, you got to fight for some inches, to make up some ground. And, I think our roster is getting better, facilities are getting better, but we want to kind of keep that brand name where we're fighting a little bit to not just be a competitive team in the league, but be able to compete for championships in the league.
Coach, quick follow-up on that. How important is it to have an athletic department like Tennessee that supports one another, the football, the basketball, the women's basketball? How important is that to have that across the board?
It's first important to have a school that sees baseball as an important deal. And the writing is on the wall with that. With facilities, yes, but, sometimes that doesn't even tell the whole story. But if you look at the big picture, and if families take the time or fans look at it, who considers baseball to be a big deal and who doesn't. And fortunately, we've been treated that way since we've been here, even though there's been some administration changes. And then it's been unbelievable to see kind of how much everyone feeds off each other here. And everyone wants to get back to kind of the glory days of 1995 or even the early 2000s, where clearly Pat Summitt was the biggest figure on campus. But everyone was trying to keep pace with what she was doing with the women's basketball team. And they were doing a dang good job of it. I mean, there were big time athletes and big time success stories with each program all over the place. And it affects, the vibe on campus, the fan base, and, ultimately recruits want to be a part of something like that. So it's an X factor. It's not necessary, but it's an X factor that it can help push you even further in the direction you're looking to go.
Coach, last question I have for you, and we're under some time constraints, so I'm going to wrap it up real quick, Coach. But I want to ask you about playing in Omaha and playing in Hoover? Obviously, Jake and I's podcast hit it to Hoover. We've asked Paul Maneri, asked Mike Bianco the same question. What is it like playing in Omaha compared to Hoover?
I'll tell you what, I'm not so sure Hoover doesn't, the folks down there with the SEC and the city and don't do just as good of a job, if not better. And I'm not knocking the Omaha experience, but that thing is incredibly well run and structured. And again, the word vibe comes to mind. It's just a great vibe down there. And it certainly sets you up for success for the following weekend. If you're going to a regional, whether it be home or away, that whole environment kind of puts it on a tee for you. It's almost like deja vu all over again when you're in that deal. And if you are fortunate enough to make it to Omaha, it's bigger and it's more grand because it's the entire country that's involved. But again, it's kind of like, well, I've been here, done that. And it benefits those SEC teams. And I just love everything about that tournament down there in Alabama. You know, win, lose, or draw, it's a great experience for the kids, the fans, the families, and certainly the coaches. And then in Omaha, you know, it's changed. It's a little more corporate. There's been a lot of improvements since, the tournament used to be at Rosenblatt. It's certainly kind of dragged out or expanded the time in which it lasts for commerce. So a big thing that I now know from last year is you've got a lot of downtime that you need to manage. And you kind of get out of the flow that you're in during the regular season and even the postseason leading up to it. So just like the guys got to do in the Super Bowl coming up, you got to manage distractions, extra downtime. But ultimately, when the umpire says play ball, it's kind of the same thing. You're just at a really cool stadium with a big fan base. And that would be the last comment I'd make. I was kind of nervous, like, are they going to follow us to Hoover? Are they going to follow us to Omaha? And I'm not so sure we didn't have just as many fans as any team in the country at both of those venues. So that's extra incentive to get back to both and to play well and even better than we did last year.
He is Coach Tony Vitello. Coach, thank you so much for coming on the Hit It to Hoover podcast with my co-host Jake Nichols and I. It's a great honor to have you on, and good luck this season, and we'll be cheering you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and definitely appreciate you all including us. Have a good day.
Thanks, Coach.